rapid to the Ja, zet hem maar. Lopen naar je grote hoeren lopen. Ja, ja, goed. Ja, dat is goed. Ja. Ja, dat is ja, ja, dat is goed. Je kan daar weer. Je bent een blijf elkaar. Als we je klein nummer hebben, mag je niet voorbereiden. Alles om elkaar te voorbereiden. Als je dat doet, ja. Hebben ze een nieuwe gezet. Waar kwam was. Het was een drugs. Hebben ze vaak gezegd, ik vind het leuk te kijken uit. Op Facebook ook aan. Ze vaak gezegd, alles die schrijven probeer ik aan direct uit te leggen. Dat was dan in die rapport. Die mensen doen dat vaak. Dat doen ze dat vaak. En meneer accepteert het niet meer. Nee, meneer is 40 jaar hier. Daarom meneer zegt, meneer is 40 jaar hier. Ja, meneer hebben dus ook niet zo over hoe politiek doet. Meneer kan dat ook doen. Ja, meneer is dan geworden. Of meneer staan is daar naast familie. Wat wil ik zeggen? U hebt 10 jaar gestudeerd. Als ik heb ook 10 jaar gestudeerd, wat wil je mij zeggen? Wat wil je mij zeggen? Dat wij een beetje gewoon concreet zijn. Wat staan beschrijven? Dat wil zeggen, ik val ze lasten voor geld. Dat is niet waar. Nee, hun hebben geld gekregen voor alles te betalen. Hun hebben het niet gedaan. Hun hebben berekening verlengen naar 5 jaar door een begeleider. Dus als het mij hoort, tel niet de opstand kijk weg. Dat moet uit als die bonnen hebben gedaan. En die is niks te praten. Dan zullen we kijken hoe we dat doen. Zo simpel is dat. De ramen gaan met Curaçao. Op Curaçao helpen ze meneer met jullie oplichterij. Op Curaçao doen ze dat ook. Terwijl bij mij kan ze dat niet doen. Als ze hun lullen op Curaçao, ik word een soeverein. Soeverein, ik word op die eiland. Als ik zweer ik dat. Alleen is gezegd. Ik wacht een minister. Wat kom je doen? Het is niet jouw grond, het is mijn grond. Is mijn grond, is mijn huis. Je hebt mij niet kunnen te zeggen. Ik studeer die wet. Ik weet het mijn recht. Dat is simpel gaat. Ik ga mijn programma kijken. Ik heb het niet om te stressen. Nee, ik voel mij kapot vandaag. Ik lees het dat. We hebben meer rapporten, ook van Zeeland, wat ik weet, dat klopt niet. Ramp, ik heb het niet. Ik ben trots als ik ga ik ga woensdag of donderdag. Ik ga naar de bibliotheek. Ik ga liever naar Leiden. Ja, donderdag naar Leiden. Tussen 10 en 12 uur. Hebben mensen, wat geeft jou les? Kan je dingen schrijven, kijk hoe moet je bepaalde dingen via je computer doen. En e-mail, allemaal. Dan de echt verslag op mijn gegevens. Ja, wat niet iedereen hebben. Ik gebruik andere woorden. Ik weet niet wat voor woorden moet ik gebruiken, wat voor letters. Allemaal ook natuurlijk. En ik denk ik best. Ik niet leuk, dat is daar geleden. Natuurlijk niet geven, blijven, buiten, waar die hoeven spellen, spellen van 1936 in. Die kijk, mijn belangrijk, op die club. Hij is van goed. En deze aan ik kan niet nog kwestie bij mezelf beginnen met ambulancebemingen. Dan kan je niet want bij de randlijst zitten. Mensen weten niet waarom blijft zitten.
Terwijl Europese opsporingsdiensten hun aandacht jarenlang richten op Mexicaanse kartels, de Italiaanse maffia en de Nederlandse onderwereld, groeide er op de achtergrond een organisatie uit tot een van de machtigste spelers binnen de internationale cocaïnehandel.
Als je die man maar uiteindelijk daar probeer ze haar in te luisteren. Alles door de haven van zijn body's. Door naar de pakken, dan vragen ze Amerika om aan de Europa. En sturen daar de eerst weer terug naar Amerika. En de service van die man. En daar komen ze aan pakken.
Terwijl tonnen cocaïne de Atlantische Oceaan overstaken, bouwde hij
een
netwerk op dat miljoenen euro's verdiende aan de internationale drugshandel. Hij werkte samen met criminelen uit Brazilië, Colombia en verschillende Europese landen en groeide uit tot een van de belangrijkste schakels binnen het beruchte Balkankartel. Maar om te begrijpen hoe iemand als Kostovski zo machtig kon worden, moeten we eerst terug naar het begin van de jaren 90.
Die jaren 90, er was een mooie tijd om met alles. Natuurlijk, er was vroeger, mensen weten niet.
Nog een spoor van verwoesting op de regio. Overheden verloren grip op grote delen van het land.
Als we net daar zo tablets gebouwd de organisatie hebben ze niet geboden. Dan zijn ze op straat gegaan. Voor die kleine dieven. En die grote niet hebben ze laten doen. Waarom was het zoveel moord? We hebben zelf ook.
Terwijl Europa steeds meer cocaïne begon te consumeren, zagen deze groepen nieuwe kansen ontstaan. In Zuid-Amerika draaiden de cocaïne-laboratoria op volle capaciteit en kartels uit landen als Colombia, Peru en Bolivia waren voortdurend op zoek naar betrouwbare partners die hun product naar Europa konden brengen. De criminelen uit de Balkan bleken daarvoor ideaal. Ze beschikten over ervaring in smokkelen, waren gewend om onder moeilijke omstandigheden te opereren en hadden bovendien iets wat veel andere organisaties niet hadden: uitgebreide kennis van de internationale scheepvaart. Veel mannen uit landen als Montenegro, Servië en Kroatië hadden jarenlang gewerkt op vrachtschepen die over de hele wereld voeren. Ze kenden de havens, de vaarroutes en de logistieke processen. Kennis bleek van onschatbare waarde toen de cocaïnehandel steeds internationaler werd. Langzaam ontstond een samenwerkingsverband dat later bekend zou worden als het Balkankartel. Geen traditionele organisatie met één leider, maar een netwerk van verschillende groepen die samenwerkten wanneer dat financieel voordeel opleverde. Binnen dat netwerk begon één naam steeds vaker op te duiken: Slobodan Kostovski. Voordat hij uitgroeide tot een internationale drugsbaron, had hij al een aanzienlijk strafblad opgebouwd. Hij werd in verband gebracht met gewapende overvallen die geweldsmisdrijven. Maar zijn echte doorbraak kwam pas toen hij Europa verliet, die zich vestigde in Brazilië. Daar zag hij mogelijkheden die anderen nog niet zagen. Brazilië vormde een ideale uitvalsbasis voor cocaïnesmokkel. Het land ligt dicht bij verschillende cocaïneproducerende regio's en beschikt over enorme havens, waar dagelijks duizenden containers worden verwerkt. Kostovski vestigde zich in Vila Velha, een kustplaats vlak bij de haven van Victoria. Vanaf die locatie kon hij leveranciers ontmoeten, transporten organiseren en tegelijkertijd toegang houden tot internationale vrachtroutes richting Europa. Voor de buitenwereld leidde hij een relatief onopvallend leven. Hij woonde samen met zijn Braziliaanse vrouw en zoon en leek op het eerste gezicht bijna op een internationale drugsbaron. Maar achter die façade groeide een organisatie die uiteindelijk verantwoordelijk zou worden voor gigantische cocaïne Volgens onderzoekers bouwde Kostovski sterke banden op met lokale criminele organisaties en wist hij een constante aanvoer van cocaïne veilig te stellen. Zijn bijnaam, de General, kreeg hij niet zomaar. Rechercheurs omschreven hem als iemand die zijn operaties zorgvuldig voorbereidde en voortdurend nadacht over nieuwe manieren om zijn netwerk uit te breiden. Naast cocaïnesmokkel werd hij volgens verschillende onderzoeken ook in verband gebracht met witwassen en wapenhandel. Winsten uit de drughandel werden gebruikt om nieuwe operaties te financieren, waardoor zijn invloed steeds verder groeide. Langzaam veranderde zijn organisatie in een internationale onderneming die zich uitstrekte van Zuid-Amerika tot diep in Europa. Een woordbestel kan zo'n paar duizend euro kosten. En maatwerk hoor je dat kost geld en daarom hebben. De smokkelmethodes werden steeds geavanceerder. Cocaïne werd verborgen in containers tussen legale goederen, overgeladen op zee of verstopt met behulp van corrupte havenmedewerkers. Het systeem werkte jarenlang verrassend effectief. Terwijl douane en politie probeerden de stroom drugs te stoppen, bleven de transporten Europa binnenkomen. Tegen het einde van de jaren 2000 waren Balkancriminelen uitgegroeid tot een van de belangrijkste spelers op de Europese cocaïnemarkt. Maar hoe groter de organisatie werd, hoe meer aandacht ze trok van opsporingsdiensten. In 2006 kreeg de Braziliaanse politie informatie van Duitse autoriteiten. Verschillende onderzoeken begonnen samen te komen en langzaam ontstond een beeld van een man die veel meer was dan een gewone smokkelaar. Rechercheurs ontdekten dat Kostovski gebruik maakte van meerdere identiteiten en valse paspoorten, waardoor hij zich relatief vrij tussen verschillende landen kon bewegen. Ondanks die voorzorgsmaatregelen kwam de politie steeds dichterbij. Ondertussen groeide ook de omvang van de transporten. Waar het vroeger ging om tientallen kilo's cocaïne, werden nu honderden kilo's en zelfs tonnen tegelijk geplaatst. Dat werd wereldwijd zichtbaar toen Amerikaanse autoriteiten in 2019 een vrachtschip onderschepten, waarop maar liefst 18 ton cocaïne werd aangetroffen. De straatwaarde werd geschat op meer dan $1 miljard. Voor opsporingsdiensten was het opnieuw een bevestiging van de enorme schaal waarop het Balkankartel opereerde. Toch betekende zulke vangsten niet het einde van de organisatie. Nieuwe routes werden geopend, nieuwe contacten werden gelegd en de handel ging door. Maar de druk op Kostovski nam toe. Uiteindelijk leidde een onderzoek naar een opslagplaats in de Braziliaanse staat Espírito Santo tot een belangrijke doorbraak. Bij een inval ontdekten agenten honderden kilo's cocaïne die verborgen zaten in steenblokken die bestemd waren voor export naar Oost-Europa. De vondst leidde tot zijn arrestatie. Samen met medeverdachte Branislav Banevski werd Kostovski veroordeeld tot 20 jaar gevangenisstraf. Voor veel mensen bleek dat het einde van zijn carrière. Toch bleek dat anders te lopen. Volgens onderzoekers bleek hij zelfs vanuit de gevangenis invloed uitoefenen op het netwerk. Het Balkankartel was immers niet afhankelijk van één persoon. Wanneer een leider wegviel, namen anderen zijn taken over. Na bijna 8 jaar gevangenschap wist Kostovski zelfs te ontsnappen. Met behulp van een vals paspoort verdween hij uit Brazilië en keerde terug naar Europa. Voor de autoriteiten was het een enorme vernedering. Maar inmiddels beschikte de Europese opsporingsdiensten over een nieuwe wapen, de versleutelde communicatienetwerken EncroChat en Sky-ACC. Toen politie erin slaagde deze systemen te infiltreren, kregen onderzoekers plotseling toegang tot miljoenen berichten uit de internationale onderwereld. Ook Kostovski dook op in die gesprekken. Rechercheurs zagen hoe hij opnieuw betrokken was bij grootschalige cocaïnetransporten en nog altijd een belangrijke rol speelde binnen het netwerk. Uiteindelijk leidde een onderzoek naar een transport van ongeveer 2,7 ton cocaïne betekende niet het einde van het Balkankartel. Vandaag de dag behoort het netwerk nog steeds tot de belangrijkste leveranciers van cocaïne in Europa. Jaarlijks worden recordhoeveelheden drugs onderschept in havens zoals Antwerpen en Rotterdam. Maar tegelijkertijd laten die vangsten zien hoeveel cocaïne er nog altijd onderweg is. Voor iedere onderschepte container zijn er andere die hun bestemming wel bereiken. En dat is precies wat het Balkankartel volgens onderzoekers zo gevaarlijk maakt. Het netwerk past zich voortdurend aan nieuwe omstandigheden aan. Routes veranderen, leiders worden vervangen en samenwerkingen ontstaan, zodra dat financieel voordeel oplevert. Juist daardoor blijft het voor opsporingsdiensten zo moeilijk om de organisatie volledig uit te schakelen. Het verhaal van Slobodan Kostovski laat zien hoe de georganiseerde misdaad in de afgelopen decennia is veranderd. Criminele organisaties opereren niet langer binnen de grenzen van één land en functioneren als internationale ondernemingen met contacten over de hele wereld. En hoewel Kostovski opnieuw achter de tralies belandde, blijft dezelfde vraag bestaan. Hoe stop je een netwerk dat zich uitstrekt over meerdere continenten? Zolang de vraag naar cocaïne in Europa blijft bestaan, zullen organisaties zoals het Balkankartel nieuwe manieren blijven vinden om die markt te bevoorraden. Daarmee is de arrestatie van Kostovski waarschijnlijk niet het einde van het verhaal, maar slechts één hoofdstuk in een veel grotere strijd, die zich nog altijd afspeelt in de schaduwen van de internationale onderwereld. Bedankt voor het kijken. Abonneer je op mijn kanaal en klik op het belletje, zodat je geen enkele video hoeft te missen.
Een Zwitserse ingenieur heeft net een manier gevonden om kamers in minder dan 90 seconden te koelen, zonder een druppel freon of energieverspilling. Het heet Brisa AC en het gaat razendsnel. In slechts 30 dagen.
Terwijl heel Nederland jaagt op Bolle Jos, lijkt justitie niet vooral de mensen om hem heen één voor één uit te schakelen. En misschien was niemand belangrijker dan de man die bekend stond als Don Vito. Zijn zwager Abdullah al-Ploe. De naam Jos Luijenders hangt inmiddels als een schaduw over de internationale cocaïnehandel. In Nederland en België is hij uitgegroeid tot een van de meest gezochte criminelen van Europa. Een man die volgens justitie verantwoordelijk zou zijn voor gigantische drugstransporten, miljoenenwinsten en een netwerk dat zich uitstrekt van de havens van Antwerpen tot Dubai, Turkije en zelfs Sierra Leone. Maar terwijl
June 10, 1945. Beneath a dilapidated bridge in El Molar, Madrid, a body is doused in gasoline and incinerated in the dead of night. The 50-year-old victim, his skull fractured and body saturated with sedatives, is dumped like industrial waste by a group of secret agents. That man was Michel Skolnikov. This is the most bitter paradox of World War II. An anonymous individual burning to ashes in the darkness had once been the richest man in France during the Nazi occupation. Imagine this. In 1942, while millions of Jews were being herded into gas chambers, Skolnikov, also a Jew, was casually raising a glass of champagne at his lavish mansion right next to the Arc de Triomphe, surrounded by prominent SS officers. How? He sold his soul to the devil. Setting up a network of shell companies, he intercepted the massive daily indemnity of 400 million francs that defeated France was forced to cede to Germany. He held a monopoly on manufacturing uniforms for the Nazis, smuggled priceless paintings for the Gestapo, and was a welcome guest of Heinrich Himmler's personal assistants. From a stateless man on the brink of deportation, he seized control of Paris and Monaco, accumulating a fortune equivalent to $600 million today. But blood money always demands a payment in blood. Was his death in the trunk of a car a rightful verdict of history, or a flawless heist by corrupt agents? Where did the entire billion-dollar empire of this man vanish to after the war? Welcome to Secrets of World History. Please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell right now, because coming up next, we will strip away every horrifying corner and unseal the top-secret files of the largest asset seizure in French history, the underground empire of Mandel Skolnikov, the origin of the predator. On January 28, 1895, Mandel Skolnikov was born in Charkovshchina, Belarus, a land then under the rule of the Russian Empire. Descending from a wealthy fabric merchant family, Mandel possessed the mindset of a businessman from his earliest youth. Historical research records suspicions that he belonged to the Karaite lineage, a distinct Jewish sect that was traditionally exempt from the harsh anti-Semitic policies of the Tsar. This very religious invulnerability likely cultivated a warped perspective on power within Mandel, a confidence that he could always stand beyond the reach of the law. In 1916, Mandel began his career by supplying fabric to the Imperial Russian Army. When the Bolshevik Revolution erupted in November 1917, Mandel proved his ability to ride the waves of chaos, simultaneously supplying fabric to the newly formed Red Army, while quietly plotting an escape route. As the communist regime solidified its grip on power, he managed to flee Russia with his family just in time. Throughout the 1920s, Mandel resurfaced in Poland as a banker and real estate investor. However, his recklessness plunged him into a canyon of bankruptcy and prolonged lawsuits in Warsaw and Danzig. Driven into a corner, he escaped to Belgium, where his career concluded with a notorious fraud conviction. In the early 1930s, now a hunted criminal, Mandel Skolnikov fled to France. Here, he executed his most critical turning point, shedding the name Mandel to become Monsieur Michel. In September 1934, alongside his brother Geston, he founded Textima, a company that ostensibly traded in second-hand fabrics, but in reality served as a flawless cover for dirty money flows. In 1936, despite his efforts to appear modest in Paris, his ultra-luxury American Ford automobile, a vehicle reserved exclusively for the topmost elite of the era, exposed his extraordinary. Rumors of smuggling priceless paintings and jewels from Russia began to circulate within the underworld. Skolnikov's audacity reached its peak in 1937. A French court issued a deportation order against him following a barrage of accusations, including fraud, operating an illegal banking business, and practicing medicine without a license. Yet history created a paradox. Because he was a stateless Jew whom no other nation would accept, the deportation sentence became a worthless piece of paper. He remained in France as a legal phantom. Between 1937 and 1939, despite being placed under tight police surveillance, Mandel still slipped through every single crack of the system. He bought out competitors on the verge of bankruptcy and supplied merchandise to the grandest department.
Op jouw unieke les Portugal. Bert van der Massa op elijzoalzeer.nl.
In the early morning of the 31st of August 1939, the German-Polish border was shaken by a stunning piece of news. The Nazis announced that the Polish army had attacked a radio station in Blaze, but in truth, it was just a meticulously staged act, a pretext for Hitler to ignite a war he had long been preparing for. Just one day later, German guns fired on Polish territory, commencing the 20th century's most brutal conflict. Amidst that fiery storm, Albert Förster, the Gauleiter of the Danzig region.
In the early years of the 1920s, in a convulsed Germany marked by the aftermath of war, an unknown Adolf Hitler reached the first strands of his destiny. In the wake of the First World War, when he defeated the reduced to an army of barely 100,000 men, groups of mercenaries formed by former soldiers emerged. The fear of falling into a civil war permeated the country, and in this tumultuous scenario, A small group from southern Germany adopts the swastika as their symbol and calls themselves the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In this stage, Hitler, a 30-year-old former soldier and modest employee of the army, has not yet taken a leadership position in the party. He is merely a member of the party. A veteran of the battles of the First World War, with the rank of a simple corporal, Hitler transcends mere vengeance and quickly becomes a leader, speaking in Munich's beer halls and denouncing the humiliations inflicted upon his country. In the back room of a beer hall, the modest corner of a table becomes his first office, where he writes his speeches. Although his paths are limited, his rhetorical skill grants him leadership within the small party. In the autumn of 1932, by attracting the attention of a prominent figure, Hitler glimpses the opportunity to amplify his message. Upon finding an ideal candidate, someone wealthy in the war era, he feels genuine joy thinking, that is the propaganda we need. He is someone we absolutely must have as a member of our party. In this context, he met Hermann Göring. Göring, who had gained renown for his combat and leadership skills during the First World War, was at a stage in his life where he was seeking a new purpose. The encounter between Hitler and Göring occurred at a key moment. Hitler, in search of strong and charismatic leaders to join his cause, saw in Göring the potential to play a crucial role in the expansion of the party. Their initial connection was established through political and social meetings, where they shared nationalist visions and concerns about Germany's situation. Recognizing Göring's importance in the military realm, Hitler offered him a prominent role within the party, focusing on his leadership skills and his ability to mobilize people. The offer included the opportunity to shape the party's policies from within and to become a prominent figure in the revitalization of Germany. 1933, consolidation of power and key roles. In 1933, Hitler rose to power in Germany. Following his appointment as Chancellor on January 30th, Hitler implemented a series of political and administrative changes to consolidate his position and execute his vision for the country. To ensure total control, Hitler worked closely with his closest collaborators, distributing key functions and responsibilities. One of the most notable moves was the creation of the Third Reich Cabinet, where prominent party leaders assumed strategic roles. Hermann Göring, a loyal ally from the early days of the party, was appointed Minister of the Interior for Prussia. His role encompassed the implementation of internal policies and the consolidation of National Socialist control in Germany's largest region. Joseph Goebbels took on the role of Minister of Propaganda, playing a crucial part in manipulating information and creating a narrative that supported the party's ideology. Heinrich Himmler, in charge of the SS, and Rudolf Hess, Hitler's personal secretary, also held significant roles. Himmler oversaw the paramilitary forces and the actions of the Gestapo, while Hess became the deputy Führer, acting as Hitler's personal secretary and key liaison. By assigning key roles in the Third Reich, Hitler not only distributed strategic responsibilities, but also established a carefully designed system to secure the unwavering loyalty of his collaborators. With a combination of political shrewdness and personal connections, Hitler cultivated relationships based on emotional dependence and gratitude. This tactic not only ensured efficiency in executing his plans, but also instilled the certainty that his collaborators would remain loyal and never betray him. Goebbels, Hitler's most loyal collaborator. In the decade of the 1920s, Hitler entrusted Joseph Goebbels with a delicate mission: to turn the National Socialists into the main political force in the great metropolis of Berlin, nicknamed Red Berlin, due to its communist influence. Goebbels, motivated by his quest for recognition and gratitude towards Hitler, accepted the challenge. The relationship between Goebbels and Hitler was complex, marked by emotional dependency. Goebbels, a lame man with a history of failures, saw in Hitler a charismatic and superior leader. Their relationship became almost romantic, and Goebbels yearned for Hitler's recognition and kind words. Goebbels' life was marked by illness and a disability in his leg, which he concealed with lies during the First World War. After frustrated dreams of becoming a soldier and a failed career as a bank employee, only Hitler gave his life meaning. From a bank employee to a party leader, Goebbels found a purpose in the movement led by Hitler.
Upon arriving in Berlin, Goebbels faced the task of building from scratch. With only 100 active members and small offices, he began creating a newspaper, Der Angriff. He adopted a radical strategy, stoking hatred and challenging the communists in their neighborhoods. Violent clashes and mass arrests created scandal, fueling propaganda. In 1930, the murder of Horst Wessel, a young National Socialist activist, became an opportunity for the Nazis to demonstrate their strength. Goebbels, pouring fuel on the fire, provoked the question of whether such a death was deserved. Hitler, impressed, rewarded Goebbels with the position of party propaganda chief. Thus, the relationship between Hitler and Goebbels, rooted in gratitude and the pursuit of recognition, strengthened amidst the violence of Red Berlin. Now, at the helm of the party's propaganda, Goebbels would play a vital role in manipulating information and crafting the National Socialist narrative that would spread throughout Germany. On March 13, 1933, Hitler appointed Goebbels as Reich Minister of Propaganda, granting him unprecedented power over the information and narratives disseminated across the country. The personal relationship between Goebbels and Hitler was complex. Although Goebbels expressed unwavering devotion to the Führer, his loyalty was partly based on his belief that Hitler embodied the National Socialist vision that Goebbels himself championed. Known for his sharp insight and political cunning, Goebbels understood that his influence over propaganda also granted him a privileged position within the regime. Bormann, Hitler's indomitable right-hand man. 11 years younger than Hitler, Bormann dropped out of school to fight in the First World War. While Hitler served actively in the trenches, Bormann avoided the front lines. After the war, he demonstrated his efficiency as an organizer by managing a farming enterprise. Sharing with Hitler the humiliation of a defeated nation, the two forged bonds through the scars of a country both beaten and dishonored. Germany was left completely devastated, not only economically but also psychologically and morally. The people, especially the youth, had lost faith in their future and in themselves. Bormann felt drawn to the Freikorps, a far-right group of mercenaries near his birthplace in Halberstadt, Saxony-Anhalt. In 1923, during Hitler's attempt to seize power with the Munich Putsch, Bormann became involved in the obscure murder of a young teacher associated with the Freikorps. Bormann accused him of betraying far-right ideology, though he actually perceived him as a threat and ordered his murder. During his trial, Bormann claimed that the beating was politically motivated and got out of hand, resulting in a 1-year prison sentence. While in prison, Hitler was also arrested for political reasons, and both began to be seen as martyrs of the right. Bormann used this time to read Mein Kampf, published amidst the political instability of the 1920s, with the aim of better understanding Hitler, whom he admired as an author. Bormann expressed his fascination with the unique combination of organizational stubbornness and leadership in a single person, considering it the essence of what makes a man great. On February 27, 1927, Martin Bormann took a crucial step. He joined the National Socialist Party with the goal of rising and gaining access to Hitler's inner circle. After moving to Munich, where the party headquarters was located, Bormann dedicated himself to ingratiating himself with party loyalists at the Schelling Saloon. Despite obtaining a low-profile administrative job at party headquarters, which earned him the disdain of prominent figures like Heinrich Himmler, head of the newly formed SS, Bormann climbed the party hierarchy. In 1928, upon meeting Hitler, he impressed the Führer with his diligence and willingness to take on additional responsibilities. Bormann quickly took control of the party's financing. Money cemented the bond of mutual dependence between Bormann and his master Hitler. With access to the Führer's coffers and financial secrets, Bormann revealed the truth behind the image Hitler cultivated of solitude and frugality. I own neither property nor capital. I don't smoke or drink. I eat in the most modest restaurants. Bormann knew this statement was not entirely true, as Hitler enjoyed the good life and lived in a rented apartment in Munich's best neighborhood. Later, Bormann would use party funds to purchase the entire building. The National Socialists were amassing wealth through their 8 million members, each paying 1 Reichsmark monthly. At its peak, the party had an income equivalent to around 400 million euros today. Bormann, skilled at fundraising, managed the royalties from Mein Kampf,
and collected fees for the use of Hitler's image on postage stamps. In 1933, Hitler appointed Bormann as chief of staff to Rudolf Hess, his deputy. Everyone knew Hess did not appreciate administrative formalities, as the leader of the Hitler Youth noted years later. Hess was supposed to attend all of Hitler's meetings with party leaders, but he soon delegated this responsibility to Bormann. He handled matters requiring Hitler's attention with more diligence than Hess, who was inconsistent and slow. Bormann ensured all of Hitler's orders, questions, and informal comments were recorded. Using a system of alphabetically annotated cards, he could almost anticipate Hitler's thoughts. He would later use this system to discern who had been loyal to the Führer and who had betrayed him. Starting from scratch and without being part of Hitler's inner circle in the early years, Bormann positioned himself close to the leader. With the imminence of war, he would have an even better opportunity to strengthen his relationship with Hitler. In 1936, aware of Hitler's preference for Obersalzberg in the Bavarian Alps, Bormann acquired 1,800 hectares of forest and 80 hectares of arable land at a negligible price. The transaction was carried out through the Adolf Hitler Foundation under Bormann's control. Over the 12 years of the Reich, German companies such as Krupp and AEG contributed the equivalent of 4 billion euros today to Hitler. Officially intended for cultural purposes, most of these funds were used to satisfy Hitler's personal desires. In the heart of this spectacular landscape, Bormann oversaw Hitler's rural residence, the Berghof. He tolerated no obstacles in his path and, through generous transactions, bought the acquiescence of those who might dissent in the region. Houses and trees were cleared to ensure nothing would disturb Hitler's visitors at this idyllic retreat. Bormann expropriated a nearby rural estate to ensure that the Führer, being a vegetarian, had access to vegetables of the highest quality on his table. Although Bormann had a large family to feed with his wife Gerda and 10 children, he also attended to Hitler's wish to have a tower in the countryside. They moved to Obersalzberg when the eldest child was 7 years old. Although the image of Bormann as a devoted family man was publicly projected, in reality Hitler, the party, and later various women took a more prominent place in his life than his family. Throughout his rise from humble beginnings, loyalty to Hitler was essential, but his personal survival was paramount. Upon the declaration of war, Bormann had a bunker built for himself in the mountains. This way, if the dreams of conquering the world failed, he would be safe. In May of 1941, an unexpected opportunity presented itself to Bormann. Rudolf Hess, the Führer's deputy, clandestinely traveled to Great Britain on a personal peace mission. Hitler publicly repudiated Hess, turning the trip into a public relations disaster for the regime, except for Martin Bormann. Hess had been Hitler's oldest companion, and in the face of his betrayal, Bormann acted with more fervor than the Führer himself. He removed Hess's name from all party literature, expelled Hess's wife and son from their home, and even erased any connection between Hess and his family. In an act of trust, Hitler promoted Bormann to the position of deputy, succeeding Hess. From that moment on, he performed his duties with impeccable efficiency. Hitler praised Martin Bormann with admiration, stating, "Things that take others a day, Bormann completes in 2 hours and he never overlooks anything. I know he employs brutal methods, but when I assign him a task, I can forget about it entirely." Additionally, Hitler highlighted the precision of Bormann's documents, noting that he only needed to reply with a yes or no, saving him considerable time. While others took hours, Bormann could resolve matters in 10 minutes that took others much longer. Bormann was always available to Hitler, no matter how strange or unexpected the request was, nor the hour at which it was made. Although early in their marriage, Bormann and his wife Gerda enjoyed a happy family life, with Hitler as the godfather of their eldest son, Adolf Martin Bormann. The war marked the end of that tranquility. With the onset of the conflict, any semblance of family life vanished. Bormann had several extramarital affairs, even going so far as to invite some of these women to Hitler's headquarters. Albert Speer.
Bent u ziek geworden door het werken met asbest of kwartstof? U staat er niet alleen voor. Dankzij de TSB-regeling heeft u mogelijk recht op ruim 25.000 euro. Ga voor alle informatie naar tsbregeling.nl.
is geen leeuw. Het is een wolf.
Wat zouden ze in een vakantie?
Prijsvrij vakanties.
Speer among the shadows of the Third Reich. Albert Speer stated in the early 1970s, "If Hitler ever had a friend, it was me." However, Speer clarified this statement, emphasizing that the key word in the phrase was if. Despite this, the closeness between the two was evident for more than a decade. He met Hitler in 1931. He was just another person in the audience at a rally. Speer was dazzled by the leader, impressed by his energetic oratory. He joined the party and began collaborating with that of Germany's charismatic leader. After years of waiting, the crucial moment came with the presentation of designs for the Nuremberg Congress. Hitler, an unforgiving observer, dismissed the young architect coldly without even glancing at him. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Speer was invited to a luncheon at a subsequent meeting, where the envious gazes of ministers and advisors did not go unnoticed. This encounter would mark the beginning of a relationship that transcended architecture, becoming an alliance that defied time and expectations. Speer, the confidant and executor of Hitler's grand dreams, would become a trusted figure, sharing not only monumental projects, but also everyday conversations and even vacations. In this alliance, Hitler's colossal dreams found an architect willing to make them a reality. The relationship between Albert Speer and Adolf Hitler was unique and complex, characterized by a combination of loyalty, trust, and collaboration. Although it began modestly with minor projects such as renovations and design presentations, the connection between the two deepened over time. Hitler, captivated by Speer's ability to bring his visions to life, elevated him to a more prominent role. Speer became Hitler's trusted architect and right-hand man, undertaking large-scale architectural projects and materializing the Führer's grand ideas. The relationship went beyond the professional realm and developed into a close friendship. Speer accompanied Hitler on his travels, participated in his daily conversations, and shared ambitious projects. Although the dynamic was not free from jealousy and tensions with other members of Hitler's inner circle, Speer established himself as one of the Führer's most important confidants. The Eagle's Nest, Berghof. No one thought the deadlines would be met when they began constructing the Kehlsteinhaus, the German name for the Eagle's Nest. But completing it on time was a fundamental part of the project. It was the grand, extravagant, and excessive gift that Martin Bormann had conceived for his boss, Adolf Hitler, a tribute for the Führer's 50th birthday. The Alpine House is located in an incredible place, the peak of a mountain. It was built to be both luxurious and solid. However, the uniqueness of this project lies not in its opulence, but in the fact that it is one of the few constructions associated with the Führer that still stands today. Just 10 kilometers from Salzburg, at an altitude of 1,800 meters, this house was envisioned as a retreat for Hitler. It was also intended to host foreign dignitaries visiting his secluded residence. Bormann was captivated by the monumental challenges the project presented. Everything had to be done from scratch, from building the roads to access the base, to drilling into the mountain and transporting materials to the summit. Time was pressing, and completing the project before Hitler's anniversary seemed like an impossible feat. Yet against all odds, the construction was finished on time. The cost, significant not only economically, was marked by human sacrifice, with the tragic loss of 12 workers during the process. Determined to meet the deadline, Bormann ordered non-stop work shifts, with makeshift lights illuminating the site even during the nights. The challenge of building the Eagle's Nest required the creation of a paved road spanning more than 6 kilometers, cutting into the mountain, chiseling rock, and leveling seemingly impenetrable terrain were colossal tasks. In addition, the old trail leading to the house along the mountain was repaired, and infrastructure was prepared to install an elevator that would allow Hitler to reach the summit. This section proved to be the most expensive part of the project, and tragically, claimed the most lives. Drilling into the mountain, creating a cavity, and constructing a vertical tunnel for the elevator demanded monumental effort and ultimately significant human sacrifice. The scale of the project necessitated the implementation of a cable car system to transport materials to the summit. Hundreds of men were employed, though they were often treated like slaves, enduring heavy loads and inhumane work hours. To expedite progress, prefabricated blocks were transported, giving the impression of a house ready for assembly. It is estimated that, adjusted to today's values, more than $150 million were spent on this colossal endeavor. In the nearby village, as they watched the workers and managers oversee progress, a joke became popular. They compared the situation to a gold rush, where fortune seekers arrived daily to change their lives. The difference was that instead of searching for gold in rivers or mountains, they only needed to position themselves beneath a window. It wasn't about finding gold, but waiting for Bormann to throw it out that window. The construction of the Eagle's Nest was largely justified by its proximity to the Berghof, Hitler's second official residence, where he spent a significant part of the year. What was initially conceived as a retreat eventually transformed into an alternative governmental headquarters for Germany, given the substantial amount of time Hitler spent there. Since his days after being released from prison in 1924, Hitler rented a modest Alpine house, where he found inspiration and worked on his future political plans. His infatuation with the place led him to purchase the house in 1932, according to the official version, using royalties from the numerous editions of Mein Kampf. In 1936, this austere Alpine house was transformed into a majestic mansion with 30 rooms. The expansion of the Berghof led Hitler, despite his limitations in design, to personally take charge of creating the blueprints. To do so, he borrowed various tools from his architect and minister Albert Speer, drafting tables, pencils, rulers, and other necessary materials. Attached to the original house, Hitler decided to preserve it and add new structures, thus creating an architectural monstrosity. However, this creation had to be reviewed by professionals without its original creator finding out. They had to correct the amateur mistakes while avoiding provoking his anger. Hitler claimed that this mountain house provided him with inner peace and stimulated his thoughts, serving as the backdrop for the conception of his most important speeches. But the transformation was not limited to the monstrous expansion of the house. The Berghof became part of something much larger, the Obersalzberg. This complex of residences and structures arose around the Berghof, driven by the vision of Martin Bormann, who, upon perceiving Hitler's preference for the place, hurried to purchase all surrounding. Few were displaced from their homes without any compensation. Bormann, representing the German state, seized the entire area. The money clearly did not come from the royalties of Mein Kampf. He demolished every house in the area and faced issues with the local church by ordering the removal of all crosses marking graves along the path. This centuries-old tradition, according to Bormann, darkened the Führer's mood as he traveled to his home. Bormann, Albert Speer, and Hermann Göring were just some of the high-ranking officials who built residences near the Führer's. Cabinet meetings were held in this rugged landscape, completely transforming the area. Luxury hotels, barracks for workers and soldiers, restaurants, public offices, and housing for the new wave of employees sprang up. The Obersalzberg emerged as a new center of power, and the Eagle's Nest stood as its crowning jewel, the highlight of this new settlement. The Eagle's Nest not only served the purpose of presenting a different image of Hitler, but also sought to forge the image of a serene, resolute, and self-assured statesman. Photographs and films of the leader in this idyllic setting, whether enjoying the outdoors or working at his desk, aimed to project a carefully curated public image. It was a fictional and idyllic representation meant to obscure the atrocities occurring within the concentration camp system. In the early hours of the day, Hitler often woke up early to enjoy the breathtaking alpine views from his bedroom. The relaxed atmosphere of the Eagle's Nest became the setting where the leader planned strategies and made crucial decisions for the Third Reich's machinery. The dining room of the Eagle's Nest became the place where critical decisions were shaped, and matters of great importance were debated. Hitler's daily life included meetings with other Nazi leaders, as well as with foreign guests who were received with pomp and ceremony. In the shadow of the Führer, the SS and the Gestapo in Hitler's circle, Reinhard Heydrich experienced a meteoric rise within the SS and the Gestapo, and his ability to combine intelligence, brutality, and ideological loyalty captured the Führer's attention. Appointed as the leader of the Reich Main Security Office Reichssicherheitshauptamt, Heydrich oversaw the management of the secret police, state security, and intelligence operations. The relationship between Hitler and Heydrich was characterized by a mixture of respect and pragmatic utility. Heydrich, skilled in manipulating information and executing the state's most brutal policies, earned the Führer's trust. His ability to carry out the most draconian orders, such as organizing the Wannsee Conference in 1942, where the practical implementation of the final solution was outlined, solidified his position within Hitler's inner circle. However, their relationship was not without tensions. Heydrich, nicknamed by some as the Young Caesar, garnered the enmity of certain Nazi leaders due to his unbridled ambition and lack of scruples. His role in crystallizing genocidal policies and his relentless cruelty created a complex dynamic with Hitler, who, while appreciating his efficiency, also perceived the latent threat posed by his ambitious subordinate. Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer of the SS, played a pivotal role in executing policies of persecution and repression. His relationship with Hitler developed over the years into a unique combination of fanatical loyalty and strategic utility. Like Heydrich, Himmler shared the party's racial and anti-Semitic vision, and his dedication to racial purity and territorial expansion through violence earned him Hitler's admiration. Himmler stood out for his relentless work ethic and fanatical dedication to the vision. His methodical approach was characterized by meticulous attention to detail and exhaustive planning. Despite his effectiveness in implementing the regime's policies, Himmler was not a politician seeking popularity through public charisma. He preferred to operate in the shadows, working diligently behind the scenes to fulfill the Führer's objectives. His lack of inclination toward public exposure may partly be attributed to his reserved personality and dedication to clandestine operations. His austere image and ability to avoid political spotlight did not mean that Himmler lacked influence. On the contrary, his position within Hitler's inner circle and his control over security and repression forces made him a key figure in the National Socialist machinery. Eva Braun and Hitler, a love in the storm. Born on the 6th of February 1912, Eva had an idyllic childhood. She was a girl who loved sports and Western novels. In October of 1929, at Heinrich Hoffmann's photography studio, an unexpected destiny began to unfold for Eva Braun. While Adolf Hitler, the future Führer, visited his party friend, the young woman irrevocably caught his attention. In a letter to a relative, Eva described Hitler as a man of a certain age with a funny little mustache. It was at that moment, with a gentle tone and an invitation to the opera, that the connection between the two began. But before embarking on their romance, Hitler, ever the planner, investigated Eva's family tree to ensure there were no traces of Jewish ancestry. The relationship between the two lovers was far from easy. Proof of this are the two attempts Eva made on her own life. The first occurred in 1932, during Hitler's grueling election campaign to seize power, which led him to deliver up to 4 speeches a day. Eva shot herself in the chest with her father's pistol. The second attempt took place in 1935, when Hitler had already secured absolute power in Germany. The reasons were the same. Eva Braun felt lonely and abandoned. Hitler's travels were constant, they spent little time together, and he paid no attention to her complaints. Although Hitler began to pay more attention to Eva, her role remained discreet. Only a very small circle of trusted individuals knew about her relationship with Hitler. It could be said that Eva Braun lived in the shadow of the Führer. Despite women playing a secondary role in Hitler's life and the leadership being composed entirely of men, women were essential to the Führer's politics, in the majestic wolf setters that echoed like whispers in the wind. In 1942, Obersalzberg saw Hitler as a fleeting visitor, but in those brief moments, Eva Braun became the weaver of familial instances, capturing the essence of a leader in her visual diary. War, a response in the silence of 3 months of absence. In Goebbels' diaries, on the 25th of June, 1943, a note about Eva Braun resonates. She is imbued with culture, her artistic judgment resonates with intelligence and maturity. She is the bastion that supports the Führer in this storm of history. Thus, in the crossroads of war, Eva Braun emerged as a beacon of support and culture amid the storm that ravaged the earth. Shadows and Secrets, Hans Bauer and Theodor Morell in Hitler's circle. Hans Bauer and Theodor Morell were 2 distinctive figures within Hitler's inner circle. Each played a unique and, to some extent, paradoxical role in Hitler's personal and professional sphere. Hans Baur, a career Luftwaffe pilot, became Hitler's personal pilot in 1932. His connection with the Führer was forged in the skies and extended throughout the tumultuous era of the Third Reich. Baur not only transported Hitler on his travels, but also became a close confidant and friend. His unique position allowed him to witness firsthand the evolution of Hitler's life, from his early triumphs to the dark final days in the Berlin bunker. Throughout the war, Baur remained at the forefront of the state's machinery, transporting Hitler to various battlefronts and witnessing critical decisions that shaped the fate of the Third Reich. His loyalty to the Führer was unquestionable, and although his role was not political in the conventional sense, his position as Hitler's personal pilot made him a direct participant in the narrative of the war and the regime's downfall. On the other hand, Theodor Morell, Hitler's personal physician, entered the Führer's circle of trust in a different way. His relationship with Hitler revolved around health matters, but his influence extended beyond medical consultations. Morell, credited with introducing unconventional and controversial treatments such as vitamin injections and complex substances, became an intriguing figure in Hitler's life. Morell, born on the 22nd of July, 1886, brought with him a blend of medical methods and unorthodox theories. Although his treatments were not always endorsed by the medical community, Morell managed to gain Hitler's trust, as the Führer often sought his advice on health issues. Their relationship went beyond the medical, with Morell occasionally serving as a confidant. Conspiracies in the shadows, the decline of the Nazi leadership. In a tragic twist, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, found himself at an ethical crossroads. Aware of the inevitability of German defeat, Rommel, along with other senior officers, began to consider the possibility of separate peace negotiations with the Western Allies.
We gaan proefzitten bij Tuinleerland.
Part two, folks. Bring it on. Let's do this. Let's finish this.
This group of conspirators, known as the Kreisau Circle, sought to prevent a Soviet occupation in eastern Germany, while ending the conflict in a more controlled manner. Rommel's perceived betrayal reflected the growing disillusionment within military ranks. The realization that the war was lost, coupled with discontent over the regime's ruthless tactics, led to a silent re-evaluation of loyalty to Hitler. The Kreisau Circle and other similar groups represented internal resistance, a covert betrayal that undermined the Führer's authority during his most critical moments. The most well-known plot against Hitler was orchestrated within the heart of the military machine, the assassination attempt on the 20th of July 1944, also known as Operation Valkyrie. Klaus von Stauffenberg, a German army colonel and active member of the Kreisau Circle, carried out a bold assassination attempt by placing a bomb in the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. Although the explosion caused considerable damage, Hitler miraculously survived, suffering only minor injuries. Operation Valkyrie, conceived as a desperate act to end the war and the regime, revealed the deep divisions within the German army. Stauffenberg and his co-conspirators, including high-ranking officers like Ludwig Beck and Erwin von Witzleben, risked betraying their leader in a desperate attempt to change the course of history. However, the failure of the plot resulted in brutal reprisals. Thousands of people, including those connected to the conspiracy and many innocents, were executed in an act of relentless vengeance by the regime. In the regime's final breaths, the Minister of Armaments and War Production, Albert Speer, also distanced himself from Hitler. Aware of the impending defeat, Speer chose not to follow Hitler's orders to implement a scorched earth policy, destroying infrastructure and resources before the arrival of Allied forces. This decision, while not an active betrayal, marked a significant act of defiance against the Führer's self-destructive directives and helped alleviate the suffering of the German population in the final stages of the war. In the lost pages of Lieutenant General Hans Bauer's diary, a trusted confidant within Adolf Hitler's inner circle, lies the epic account of the final moments of the Third Reich. Deep within an underground bunker in Berlin on the 30th of April 1945, Bauer's words reveal the curtain of tragedy and despair that enveloped the Führer. Hitler approached, gripping my hands tightly, recalled Bauer, whose life ended in 1993 at the age of 96. Bauer, it is time to say farewell. My own generals have turned against me. My loyal soldiers are abandoning the fight, and I am unable to continue. I tried to persuade him, assuring him that planes were still available and that I could take him far away, to Japan, to Argentina, or where benevolent sheikhs would welcome him with open arms, grateful for his stance against the Jews, the pilot recounted. The war will end with Berlin's fall, and I will be here standing or falling with Berlin, Hitler replied firmly. A man must summon the courage to face the consequences, and so I am ending this now. I know that tomorrow millions will curse me. That is my fate. But the Russians know of my presence in this bunker, and I fear they might use gas bombs. There are gas extractors here, I know, but can they truly be trusted? In any case, I do not trust them, and today it all ends. Tragedy and betrayal, the fall of the collaborators of the Third Reich. In the ruins of the Third Reich, the fall of Adolf Hitler was followed by the disintegration of the Nazi leadership, marking the tragic epilogue of an era. Hermann Göring, the Reich Marshal and designated successor, found himself at a crossroads after Hitler's death. Amid the prevailing confusion, Göring proclaimed himself the leader of the Reich and attempted to contact the Allies to negotiate surrender. This act was interpreted by Hitler as treason, and Göring was stripped of all his positions. Captured by Allied forces in May of 1945, Göring expected to be a witness of the Nuremberg trials. However, before facing his fate in the defendant's dock, he committed suicide by cyanide on the 15th of October 1946, thus avoiding the sentence that would likely have condemned him for war crimes. Heinrich Himmler, the sinister leader of the SS, took a different path. In a desperate attempt to save his life, Himmler secretly tried to negotiate with the Western Allies after Hitler's death. However, when discovered, he was detained by British forces. Before facing trial, Himmler chose suicide by ingesting cyanide on the 23rd of May, 1945. His death ended any possibility of him answering for his horrendous crimes in court. The figure of Albert Speer also faded in the run-up to the trial. Known for his efficiency in managing the war economy, Speer tried to distance himself from the crimes of the regime by admitting his limited responsibility at the Nuremberg trials. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for war crimes and crimes against humanity. During his imprisonment, Speer reflected on his actions and wrote extensively about the collapse of the Nazi regime. He was released in 1966 and dedicated his later years to writing and reflection, passing away in 1981. Martin Bormann took a more mysterious path. After Hitler's death, Bormann attempted to escape Berlin and evade capture. For decades, his fate remained uncertain. However, in 1972, his remains were discovered in Berlin and confirmed through DNA testing. The truth about his death, amidst the chaos of battle and surrender, shed light on the fate of one of Hitler's closest collaborators. Joseph Goebbels took a dark route to the end. After Hitler's suicide, Goebbels briefly assumed the leadership of the Reich, and along with his wife Magda, orchestrated the murder of their 6 children before committing suicide on the 1st of May 1945. His tragic end marked the total collapse of the Nazi hierarchy. Heinrich Müller, head of the Gestapo, faced a more elusive fate. He disappeared in the final days of the war, and his whereabouts remain a mystery. It is presumed he died in Berlin, but the lack of conclusive evidence fuels theories about his possible escape.
Chester Nimitz now knew exactly where the enemy would strike. The Japanese plan was typically complex. A diversionary attack on the Aleutian Islands in the North Pacific would draw away part of the US fleet, while Midway was seized by an occupation force. The Americans would be obliged to hurriedly commit their carrier force to retaking the island. There they would be annihilated by a huge Japanese naval presence, including 4 large aircraft carriers. It was the second Japanese attempt to wipe out the US Navy in the Pacific within a year. Forewarned, the American carriers left port and moved to a position where they could ambush the Japanese. On June 3rd, 1942, Japanese forces launched the expected attack on the Aleutian Islands. Nimitz didn't respond. Then, early the next morning, the main Japanese carrier force launched a first airstrike on Midway Island to soften up its defenses. US warplanes from the island intercepted them. Most were outdated Brewster Buffaloes and were easily shot down by the more agile Japanese Zero fighters. But the Japanese attack had been blunted. Midway's defenses had not been broken. The Japanese commander, Admiral Chuiki Nagumo, faced a difficult decision. He kept some of his aircraft in reserve, loaded with munitions designed specifically for attacking ships, just in case the US fleet was spotted. Should he now order this reserve to be stripped of its torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs and reloaded with high explosive and fragmentation bombs for a second strike on Midway? It would leave him ill-equipped to take on the US Navy, but he calculated it was a risk worth taking. Then, just as the reloading was underway, he received unwelcome news. The US naval force had been spotted. Was this the US carrier force, or a smaller, less significant fleet of ships? Nagumo was in a dilemma. Should he continue with the second strike on Midway, or should he once again re-equip his bombers to take on the US vessels? Nagumo decided to gamble. He would push ahead with the second strike on Midway. His hope was that when the bombers returned, there would still be time to rearm them to take on the US ships. Even as he weighed the odds, the Japanese carriers were attacked by US bombers. Every available Japanese Zero fighter was scrambled before the US bombers were repelled. Then came another report from reconnaissance planes. The US force did indeed contain aircraft carriers. Nagumo was, once again, on the spot. His aircraft were halfway through reloaded, but the US carriers were a much more important target. He took a second gun. He decided to change their weapons
plans yet again to attack the US force. But while he did so, his ships would be sitting ducks. Almost immediately, they came under attack from low-flying US torpedo bombs. But they were old and slow and attacked without fighter support. As they approached the Japanese fleet, they were rapidly shot down. For a brief period, it looked as though Nagumo's gamble had paid off. Then, just as his bombers had been reloaded and were ready to take on the US carriers, disaster struck. US dive bombs, approaching unseen at high altitude, hurtled down the ships. The Japanese were caught completely by surprise. Nagumo had gambled once too often and was now at the mercy of American air power. Within 5 minutes, the US dive bombers had reduced 3 of Japan's largest aircraft carriers to flaming wrecks. Or later sinking. The fourth carrier, the Hiryu, had been masked by a rainstorm, and that afternoon mounted a desperate counter. The US carrier Yorktown was severely damaged. It was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine several days later. But the Japanese fighting was short. Late in the afternoon that day, the enemy was forward and turned into a blazing fire. In a matter of hours, Japan's last of the ship being destroyed. In that column, they had only nothing. It had cost Japan its finest carriers and 332 aircraft. Well over 2,000 sailors had also died. America now ruled the waves in the Pacific. Yet Japan was still undefeated on land, and a powerful threatening force in the air. In the coming months, it would try to maximize these advantages. By summer 1942, Japanese plans to build a defensive ring of occupied territories around their homeland had still not been completed. Heavy losses at sea had frustrated their attempts to grab Papua New Guinea and Irish in sea. Japanese plans now came either by sea or by land. On July 21st, a division-sized force of experienced jungle troops landed on the northern coast of Papua New Guinea. They immediately struck west and captured Fort Moresby. Progress was swift at first. The small Australian defence force was completely outnumbered. In weeks, the Japanese protected the main pass over the Owen Stanley Mountain.
They then halted to await reinforcements before the final push on Port Moresby. The Australians also mustered new forces. When the Japanese moved off again, they now met much stiffer resistance. For the first time, Japanese troops were up against men who matched them for training, experience, and morale. The Australians stood their ground, and the Japanese were temporarily brought to a standstill. But conditions in the jungle were appalling. There was constant tropical rain. Malaria was rife. The Australians were eventually again forced to retreat. After 2 months of grim fighting, the Japanese were within 30 miles of Port Moresby. Then, finally, US reinforcements arrived. Through September and October, the Japanese were, in their turn, forced back. The Japanese made an heroic but suicidal stand. Many chose to die fighting rather than surrender. It took the Allies another 2 months before the Japanese were finally overwhelmed. It had been a bloodbath. 15,000 Japanese troops had embarked on the operation. Only 3,000 got away. The Japanese were in trouble. They'd lost at sea. They were now rapidly losing the initiative on land. American military might was asserting itself. There was only one alternative left. Air. Guadalcanal in the southern Solomon Islands. But the Japanese
following year.
Ready, boys. Um, Honorable ma'am. Let us
Wavell was true. Now exhausted, he's replaced by General Claude Auchinleck. Auchinleck, immediately.
Finally, Auchinleck his southern flank. Ja, hallo. Then finally, British fighter. The German bombardment in autumn 1941.
Nee, je hebt eten daar.
Supply convoys to North Africa. Almost immediately, they were informed by the team that the broke Germany's Enigma code was prepared. The Battle of El Alamein had begun.
Montgomery had been forewarned by the Enigma code breakers, and his troops were waiting as the German tanks rolled forward. Gamble in North Africa had taken a terrible toll on German resources.
another like Arab forced to pour in yet more scarce resources to protect his southern flank. He told his commanders that even if Italy surrendered, they should above all, suffering. To save their troops. That the bombers accidentally hit London.
Then a force of nearly 450 Lancaster bombers swept over the city, dropping their bombs.
But neither economic wouldn't need a fighter escort for Harry to be shot down. His force. There was still no sign of it helping to usher in a victory. Then, in the early summer of 1944, as the Allies prepared to invade mainland Europe, the British and American air forces were tasked with disrupting German communication lines and oil supplies. It represented a return to targeted infrastructure bombing. But this time, the Allies had a new weapon. The British had experimentally modified the US fighter, the P-51 Mustang. The US engine had been replaced by a British-made Rolls-Royce Mercury. It gave the plane a much longer range. It was the ideal long-distance bomber pistol. The Allied bombers hit bridges and roads leading to the German front in France with almost surgical precision. Oil supplies to the German military were drastically reduced. Once again, the German fighters attacked, but they were now outmaneuvered by the Mustang. Much of the German Air Force, now running low on fuel, was grounded. The campaign of targeted bombing on Germany's infrastructure may not have been the knockout blow the Allies hoped for, but it was finally paying dividends. But one man was not impressed. Bomber Harris was still obsessed with the idea that ever more devastating carpet bombing attacks would stop Germany in her tracks once and for all. So it was that in late 1944, Britain returned to carpet bombing. German city after city was hit and devastated. Then, in February 1945, Harris attacked Dresden, a city with virtually no inflated by no regard. Was a raid finally questioned. civilian. Those have done. They're not. They put their blow. For once, and also good figure on board. Lots of food. Called in the 1930s. There's two through the British. They're in the north, to the north of that. The British Navy Britain with her deck up. One 100 miles. never share. Reduce romance and art. Convoy. To become the convoys. Bad would often other convoys. Britain 10.
Maakt niet uit op. Kan niet vooruit van die man. Was lang nu. Maakt niet, die sleutel moet weggegooid. Tuurlijk. Gooi die sleutel weg. Tuurlijk. Maar dit doet niet eruit. Nee. Er zijn heel veel.
In September 1943, 5 British midget
Er zijn heel veel waar horen niet eruit.
sent into the Norwegian fields.
En pedofiel is dit. Hij is pedofiel. Alleen.
Attack caused a
Heb je die kinderen misbruikt?
The following spring, the Turkics
Zijn een paar.
ready to menace.
Zijn ook een bende van Vello. Ook gestoorde man. Hij is ook gestoorde. Natuurlijk. En hebben die Vello geterroriseerd. In een paar jaren tijd. Tuurlijk, er staan alles hier. Alle criminelen top. Johan van der Sloot. Willem Holley, Peter de Vries, Willem Holley. Kinderen, Bob Marley. Die clown van Amerika ook. Tuurlijk. Die cannibal van Colombia. Cannibal, die ook. Willem van Boston. Willem van Wijken. Ook ze is hij ook dood. Heb je ook kinderen misbruikt? Ja, maar zieke mensen. Zo heeft zien dat. Ja, maar zieke mensen. Ja.